Tonight, where did the love go in just 1 year? I mean, last year at the Australian Open, the crowd cheered the Prime Minister.
Although our Prime Minister, that is obliged.
Last night, though, it was a huge boo.
The Australian Prime Minister, the Honourable Anthony Albanese. The Deputy Victorian Premier, the Honourable Ben.
Plus, why did our Foreign Minister ignore warnings that she was handing out money to an organisation infiltrated by terrorists and their supporters? And the big neo-Nazi scare police and politicians crack down on a racist bunch of losers in black shirts on Australia Day, but do nothing about Muslim hate preachers like this.
أهم صفة من صفات اليهود هي أنهم شعب متعطش لسفك الدماء.
But first, Australia Day this year has taught us some hard lessons we badly need to learn. For me, the most extraordinary one is this, that carrying an Australian flag on Australian Day can literally now get you arrested. It's a fact. I'll talk in a minute to a couple that had that happen to them. But are you surprised? I've never seen an Australia Day where so many people have had so much hate for this country, one of the richest, safest and more free than ever seen in human history. And if we don't start pushing back, I worry there's going to be violence. Let's remind ourselves what Australia Day is actually for. It's to remind this country of people from all around the world to be grateful and to remember that what binds us here has to be bigger than all these things that divide us. Instead, this Australia Day seemed more about the hatred for this country and about what divides us, emphasising that. More than 80 council refused to hold Australia Day citizenship ceremonies, and in Melbourne, for instance, the official Australia Day march was banned, clearing the streets for the anti-Australia march, where we saw many more Palestinian flags than Australian ones, many more Aboriginal flags as well. Same in Brisbane, same in Sydney. And in Melbourne, the marchers there were clear. They wanted the Australian state destroyed. Abolish the state, they chanted.
All right, we're going to try a new one today. I'm going to say abolish the date, and you're going to say abolish the state, okay? Abolish the date! Abolish the state!
Now, this linking of those causes, the Palestinian and Aboriginal ones, that was deliberate by the organisers. It was dangerous. Here is a speaker at the Melbourne rally suggesting Israel be wiped out.
The parallels between what happened here and what happened in Palestine are absolute. Always was, always will be. From the river to the sea.
Now, the ignorance there is amazing. I mean, in fact, Jews were actually in Jerusalem thousands of years before Palestinians and thousands of years before Islam was even invented. But here we are being lectured by extremists wanting to link their deadly causes to ours, right? And being lectured also by young know-nothings who get 5 minutes of newspaper fame by disliking Australia Day. We're also being lectured to by people who seem disgusted by their own white ancestry even and linking their cause to the Palestinian one again, by talking to someone from an immigrant family in love with every ethnic and political identity except the Australian one.
My name is Jasper Cohen Hunter. I'm a Gurrung Ngulambala man of the Wurundjeri people with ancestral ties to the Noongar Ilm people of the Kulin Nations.
Hi, my name is Lama Maham. I am a Palestinian and Mauritian person living on unceded Wurundjeri Wurrung country of the Kulin Nations.
If you don't think it's ceded, then leave. I mean, seriously, you can laugh at all this, but how frightening to see mobs here inspired by a terrorist-led war against Israel and to be told that we have the same war right here. I mean, if you can't see how dangerous this is, and yet what's so irresponsible is that this hatred of Australia Day is being encouraged by the elites. Maybe they see a buck in it. Rich corporates such as Woolworths banned Australia Day. Cricket Australia refused to celebrate it, the second test, and so did Tennis Australia, the Australian Open. But again, the hypocrisy, the heads of Woolworths, Tennis Australia and Cricket Australia are all immigrants. Hey, if you guys can't celebrate Australia Day because it's so, stolen land, it's so traumatic, leave, go home, don't come. And it's all so stupid. These are people that they're demanding that history be reversed so that Australia wasn't colonised. Time doesn't work that way, guys, let me tell you, but the message from this Australia Day is now clear. Those who love Australia must, I'm afraid, fight for it. Fight peacefully, but fight. We cannot hand this country to people so full of hatred and ignorance and abuse, people wanting to divide us by race, people wanting to import ancient hatreds, the kind of people who tear down statues but build nothing themselves, don't even produce heroes of their own. The fight to save Australia from the new barbarians is on, and it's serious. Now, back to that extraordinary Australia Day news I mentioned at the start, how things are now so bad that you can be arrested for carrying the Australian flag on Australia Day. Now, Frank Stradzins and Di Thorley, they went to Melbourne City on Australia Day, dressed to celebrate this great country. The Australia Day march had been cancelled, of course, but they still saw the 21-gun salute and posed with a soldier. They were sad not to see one Australian flag at Federation Square or at the Town Hall. And even sadder about the graffiti on the tram, burn the colony. Now, Di then ducked into a shop as Frank Stradzins awaited, and, well, let me get them to tell you about it. Frank, what happened then?
Well, whilst I was standing in the middle of Swanson Street waiting for Di to get out of the dress shop, I heard a lot of noise and music and chanting. So I walked out to the middle, and there, 100 metres away towards Burke Street, was thousands of flags, Palestine flags, Aboriginal flags, chanting, singing. And within 2 minutes, a police officer approached me and said, "You are under arrest for inciting a riot." I said, "What? How?" He said, "Well, your flag's on your head." I said, "Today is Australia Day, and I've just returned from the Shrine of Remembrance 21-gun salute." And he started to walk me off the middle of the road.
And these flags he's taken exception to.
These are the ones I had on my head.
The very ones you got there.
Yep. And my partner, Diane, was in the shop. She had them on her head as well. And we had them on all day. And we only saw 2 other flags in 4 hours.
And in all this time, right, no one else had taken exception to your flags, right? You walked through the street.
Thumbs up a few times.
Thumbs up.
Yes.
You went to the 21-gun salute with the flags.
Did, yes.
No problem there.
Oh, none at all.
Did people like your flags?
It was like I could feel what movie stars are like. People wanted our photographs, and that really surprised me.
Right. Well, I'm still staggered by that. Don't fall for Anthony Albanese's spin that the boos he got last night when he was living it up again at the Australian Open was just a traditional booing that Prime Ministers always get. In fact, last year, the crowd at the Australian Open gave him a big cheer.
Give us a wave, Albo!
What was that, Josh?
Someone from the crowd yelled, "Give us a wave, Albo, our Prime Minister," and he's obliged.
But last night, just 1 year later, the crowd gave Albanese the biggest boo I've heard for a Prime Minister since Malcolm Fraser's time.
On behalf of Tennis Australia, I'd like to welcome Victorian Governor, Her Excellency, the Honourable Professor Margaret Gardner, the Australian Prime Minister, the Honourable Anthony Albanese, the Deputy Victorian Premier, the Honourable Ben Carroll. Thank you.
Albanese tried today to laugh it off as, just the usual.
Do you have thick skin, Anthony, or does that still sort of get to you? I mean, a crowd of people booing,
Oh, no, it's an Australian tradition.
Joining me is Michael Kroger, former President of the Victorian Liberals, and Steve Conroy, former Labor Senator and Cabinet Minister. Are you going to say, Stephen, that this was just the usual booing?
Well, there is a long tradition, and many prime ministers have been booed.
Cheered. This year,
no. I mean, last year, no question, big rapturous applause. This year, not so rapturous. Not so rapturous.
Geez, polite, isn't it?
Not so rapturous.
I love that. That's what you call a euphemism.
So the praise was modified.
Modified.
But you don't take anything out of that.
Look, I think Albo's lost some paint over the last few months, and I think that was a representation of it. Do I think that, as some are gleefully predicting, a one-term government, Albo's finished? I think that's getting a little carried away. I think we've got an important by-election in Dunkley, a seat that, frankly, Bruce Bilson held for many, many years. I mean, Dunkley, the Liberals held it with Bruce. And I just need to, just for the sake of any suggestion, the Liberal candidate named Conroy is no relation to me whatsoever.
I'm sure Bruce Bilson would have appreciated your kind words about how good he was at the time rather than after. No. But Michael, what do you make of it? Because Steve's right. I mean, this is not what the Prime Minister would want to hear in the most left-wing state in the country just a few weeks before a by-election.
Probably still with, 1 million people still watching? It's a big number. Look, Dunkley, by the way, changed by 3%. There was a 3% change to the boundary after Bruce left. So that's why it's a 6.3% Labor seat. No, Andrew, terrible, shocking. But the problem is, if you tell a lie and tell it often enough, it will not be forgotten. This guy's credibility is shot. And today we saw Chalmers trying to say, oh, no, we've got no intention of bringing back negative gearing or whatever. No one believes these people anymore, nor should they, Andrew.
Well, you just mentioned Jim Chalmers trying to hose down reports, suggestions that there are Labor MPs that want him now to revisit negative gearing, among other things, which the government promised before the election it wouldn't touch. Here's the questioning of him today.
We're not contemplating or considering resurrecting the policies that we took to the 2019 election. We're not contemplating other areas.
See, this is the rod that Anthony Albanese has made for his own back, right? Because now Jim Chalmers can say all that. He knows no one's going to believe it.
I mean, that is the difficulty that, Albo and the government now have. They've got to reconcile their statements on a whole range of other issues now with the change in position adopted. Now, they obviously, I don't believe, would, remotely want to go down the path that maybe some excited backbenchers might think is the way to go. So I think there'll be a steady as she goes. I don't think there's any chance that those things will happen. But to Michael's point, this has taken paint off the Prime Minister, off Jim Chalmers, off every Labor frontbencher.
Steve, if you had been in that cabinet, there's no way you would have said yes to this. This is exactly the issue. They can say all they like in front of the cameras. No one now can take that. Their word is no longer their bond.
In their heart, Andrew, in their heart, they all want the 19 policies, the 2019 policies.
Yeah.
They believe in doing something about capital gains tax relief, right? They want to reduce the
Mate, no one knew what a franking credit was.
They want to get.
Let's not get too excited about in their hearts.
Credits. In your heart.
I'd never heard of franking credits.
You want to tax capital gains on the sale of the family home. In your heart, that's what Labor want to do, and everyone out there now knows that. Everyone knows that. All of those policies in 19, the same people are there. Bill Shorten's still there. Bowen's still there. Albanese's still there. Plebiscite's still there. The same people that argued for that in 19, what, they don't believe it anymore? Of course they do, Andrew. And that's why this bloke Chalmers cannot be believed.
Look, whether they believe it or not, my point is really that no one will trust whatever they say. And that is the damage here. It was interesting. This scares me. The government's just appointed Greg Combet to replace former Liberal Treasurer Peter Costello as the head of the Future Fund. Now, that's supposed to manage $270 billion or whatever it is now to pay for things like the superannuation of public service so we don't run out of money down the track. Very tempting pot of money for a big spending government that has been trying to urge super funds to invest their savings in its climate schemes, which are running behind a schedule. Now, Greg Combet, Steve, is a former Labor climate change minister. You know him very well, of course, and has been chairman of the government's net zero economy agency. How safe are those super savings from being invested in Labor schemes?
Look. Firstly, Greg is a friend of mine. I did serve with him in cabinet. But if you look at Greg's recent history, he has been chair of industry funds management. He's been in charge of billions of dollars of Australian savings, and at no stage has there been any suggestion that Greg or anyone in IFM ever suggested that they just decide to go off on a frolic of their own.
They will say it's nation building.
He is a safe pair of hands.
Governments will back it.
All of those stories existed for the last 18 months. Greg was in the chair, and there was no frolics. There was no wandering off. If there was a good return to be got for members' interests and members' long-term benefits, then they were investing in it. But there was no frolics because the government said go and do this. So putting Greg Combay in charge of the super fund is a very safe pair of hands.
Michael, my concern is this. The government will say, if you do that, we're going to back it. We've got all these policies. We're going to force Australians to use more of this energy, this green energy, et cetera, and then all these super funds get invested. What that does is create a massive disincentive to then, say, oh, listen, green energy is not good. We've got to cut back on the government subsidies and whatever. How can you when the nation's savings are riding on it?
So the Board of the Future Fund regulates itself. It has investments in 12, 15, 20 different areas: private equity, venture capital, equities markets here and there, the bond market, venture, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Combay can easily increase investments in some of the areas you're talking about. And why wouldn't he? So he's always believed that. And Stephen, to say a member of the socialist left is a safe pair of hands when it comes to economics, that just doesn't gel with anybody. And the socialist left person, when he sees a cookie jar, he sticks his hand right in it. That's always been the history of the Labor Party. They can't help themselves.
Greg Combay was trusted enough by Scott Morrison.
It's a very bad appointment. They should have appointed someone from the financial markets.
Scott Morrison appointed Greg Combay to the COVID Commission to look after all of our interests with a group of other individuals. So your government previously trusted Greg's safe pair of hands, and that's absolutely why
that's not quite my issue.
Australia should be worried about this appointment. They should cheer.
We shall see. The Prime Minister must be desperate, Stephen. He's appointed Catherine Murphy, the political editor of the far-left Guardian Australia, to his office. Talk about hiring someone out of touch with the punters he needs to reconnect to, the struggle street. But just as interesting is a sarcastic reaction of Opposition Leader Peter Dutton. He said, I'm genuinely shocked to see Murpharoo, Catherine Murphy, take up a spot to now be officially running lines for Labor. The real outrage is David Crowe missed out. What must he do to prove his credentials to be formally employed by the Labor Party? David Crowe is the chief political correspondent, also left-wing, Melbourne Age, Sydney Morning Herald, newspapers. What do you make of that? Is it wise?
I think it is demeaning of Peter Dutton, and there's no need. I mean, if you were to, the normal ABC attack, but these are both private companies who have their own capital, whether it's The Guardian or Channel 9, and they're entitled to hire journalists who are, a different perspective. Look, I've known David Crowe. I've known David Crowe for nearly 25 years.
You make an excellent point.
I don't consider him to be left-wing at all. No. And Catherine Murphy...
He's not left-wing at all.
Catherine Murphy is as good a friend to me, Andrew.
Right-winger.
Catherine Murphy is as good a friend to me as you are, Andrew, and I say that sincerely.
Fine.
And Catherine... And Catherine Murphy is an excellent journalist. You might not agree with her views, but she is rigorous. She is qualified.
She is way with the fairies on global warming, which is one of the issues that it's going to be a tsunami over Labor's head. And I think she's a religious maniac on that sense. And I think this will cost Labor. But I've run out of time. Michael, thank you for your interventions because we got your point of view. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Ed.
Michael Crowe, Stephen Conroy. After the break, we'll cross to politicians who are still celebrating Australia Day 3 days later. But before that, why did Foreign Minister Penny Wong ignore the warnings that she was giving out aid money to a group infiltrated by terrorists? Foreign Minister Penny Wong is putting on her shocked face at finding out about allegations that staff of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, or UNRWA, which is for Palestinian so-called refugees, were actually helping to slaughter, rape and kidnap Jews in the Hamas attack on October 7 that started this war with Israel. She announced that she has temporarily paused handing out the $6 million she promised UNRWA just 2 weeks ago. But, of course, she can't do anything about the $20 million she's already given UNRWA in 2022, when she actually doubled the grant the Morrison Liberal government had stupidly given it. But this UN organisation, UNRWA, itself last week admitted it had to now sack 9 of its staffers, many of them teachers, and investigate a couple more. And other Western countries have also ended or suspended their UNRWA funding because of this alleged involvement with that slaughter and kidnapping. Now, Wong has known for years of allegations that our money to UNRWA is being hijacked by supporters of Hamas, a terrorist group. Palestinian teachers employed by UNRWA have repeatedly been caught preaching Jew hatred and using, for instance, atlases showing Israel literally wiped off the map. No name for Israel there. In 2016, the documentary UNRWA Road to Terror even showed Palestinian children explaining what they were being taught in these UNRWA schools.
إن الصهيونية هم أعدائنا وهم أهم شيء لازم يسوي فيهم عملية.
يعني إنهم بيعلمونا بالمدرسة إنهم إرهابيين
بيحكوا لنا عن اليهود إنهم هذول مش منيح وهذول بقتلوا قاعدين بشبابنا. بيحكوا لنا هذول غدارين. وبيحكوا لنا إنه هذول بغدرونا هذول مش منيح. إذا بطعن. عمليات الدعس عمليات الطعن
ايش اكيد هدول العمليات ترفع الراس ولفلسطين
اذا بدك بطلع بستشهد عادي.
And last November, it got worse, you see. The lobby group UN Watch proved that 20 UNRWA teachers and other staff celebrated that October 7 massacre of Jews on social media accounts, praising the killers as heroes. There are also surveillance videos of gunmen, apparently Hamas, stealing aid meant for civilians, and Israeli soldiers have found and filmed entrances to war tunnels that Hamas dug in or next to UNRWA school grounds. Yet just 2 weeks ago, after all that, Wong still promised UNRWA yet another $6 million. Joining us, the country's top foreign affairs writer, Greg Sheridan, the Australian. I'm delighted to say he'll be back as a regular on this show every Monday. Greg, how could Penny Wong have ignored all those signs and still handed out millions? And now, oh, I'm shocked.
Well, Andrew, it's great to be with you. And look, I think we've been very ill-advised to give any money to UNRWA. I don't understand why Australian taxpayers have to give money to UNRWA. The Morrison government explained it to me as basically trying to buy off Muslim opinion in Southeast Asia. This was a bit of sort of Dane Geld to the Indonesians. You know, you might not like our boats policy, but here we're giving money to your Palestinian mates. But honestly, this organisation, so the allegation that they actively participated in the most profane and distressing and hideous terrorist outrage we've ever seen is, of course, something new. But we have known for years that they preach anti-Semitism. As the little boy said in that video, they teach us about Jews. They are bad people. We are to hate them. They've been preaching anti-Semitism for a long time. They are a disgusting agency. They've set up with an anti-Semitic brief. They hate Israel. They perpetuate everything that's wrong with that conflict. It's absolutely right that some aid has to go to the people of Gaza. Absolutely right. But the United Nations is a corrupt and generally wicked body, and this is its worst agency.
Absolutely. Pausing is not sufficient. Pausing our aid, cutting it is. Now, another thing that really has got me over the break when you were not here, and it's a scandal in my opinion, these Taipan helicopters. The government says it's going to bury 45 Taipan helicopters rather than let Ukraine have them to rescue wounded people from the battlefield. It really needs them, says it wants them. It's going to bury them in the dirt instead. And we now see the first of these helicopters, stripped of its parts, actually being prepared for this burial. The government says it's too unsafe to give to Ukraine. They can't fly properly. Your response?
Well, I think this government is just bananas on defence. I can't follow it at all. They made wonderful speeches in opposition, and I thought they were great. But this is among a panoply of insane government decisions on defence. This is the most insane. We won't give the Ukrainians Bushmasters because we'd have to pay to build a few more. We won't give them the Hawkeye vehicles because apparently they skid at high speed. So the Ukrainians dealing with Russian bombardment, we're protecting them from this. This is what the Ukrainians want. Instead, our support for Ukrainians is to send AWAC aircraft to protect German airspace. Then we've got these Taipan helicopters, which are used by a dozen other countries and which, you know, I think they're rubbish helicopters. I think we always should have gone for Black Hawks. But in any event, they're much better than nothing. Ukrainian soldiers are dying on the front line because they can't be evacuated. We won't send them the Hornet fighters that we disposed of, and we won't send them the helicopters, even though the Ukrainians want them. Now, I have been following defence systematically for more than 40 years in this country, and I have never seen it more incoherent or indecipherable than it is right now under this government.
It's a promise to, you know, we will stand with Ukraine. I guess it's like we will, you know, stand with the stage 3 tax cuts. Just put in that little basket. I mean, it's just, I find it disgusting, incomprehensible, and the arguments were given are absolute. You can wipe your backside with them. But to the other war, Greg, apologise for that profanity, but I do get so angry with letting Ukraine in the lurch with this feeble lying about these helicopters. To the other war, I think it's got really much more dangerous. First you had Hamas terrorists, backed by Iran, attack Israel. Then you had Houthi rebels, backed by Iran, attack shipping in the Red Sea on the way to, obviously, the Suez Canal, set a British tanker on fire just over the weekend. And now you've got Iran-backed rebels, or maybe even Iran itself, killing 3 American soldiers in a suicide drone attack on a base in Jordan on the Syrian border. Joe Biden says we're going to take action here. Here he is.
We shall respond.
How dangerous is this?
Oh, Andrew, this is the most dangerous period we've been in since World War II, which just plays up the insanity of the Albanese government doing nothing on defence. But I don't want to become John Stone-like here and quote my own column, but I've said for a long time now.
Hello, John.
One day, yeah, I love John and everything, but he used to quote himself all the time. One day, if we have a simultaneous crisis with Russia, Iran and China, we can't cope. The West is in desperate existential trouble. So now we've got Russia and Iran, both simultaneous. Iran has taken a clear and deliberate decision to escalate conflict. It's got all its proxies attacking the West. All of our enemies have worked out how to do grey zone conflict and conflict with proxies or with their own folks disguised in non-uniforms or whatever, which means that we never retaliate. Nobody in the West is doing anything significant to beef up their own defence capabilities, not even the Americans, not even the Brits. And our enemies are getting bolder and bolder. Now, we sustained ourselves in the Cold War because we had unity of purpose, clear leadership, and our enemies thought we might fight. We don't have unity of purpose, we don't have clear leadership, and our enemies are starting to doubt whether we would fight or not.
Plus, of course, there's been a technological advantage, you know, the spread of technology through the... and also asymmetrical warfare. Houthi drones, they're sending drones, and you find a British warship doesn't have the weaponry to attack them on land.
That technology is spread everywhere but Australia, Andrew, because
I forgot.
You know, we don't have a single armed drone in our entire defence force. You know it, I know it, people who read comic books know it, everybody knows it, except the Australian Defence Force.
Greg Sheridan, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate that. But look, this has to be the year that we fight back on the culture. Was that Australia Day stuff? And, you know, it's just... You can't run a country that way. You can't keep it together. But some good news. Let me now cross to an Australia Day celebration 3 days after the day itself. It's being held in Melbourne, the woke capital of Australia, even more incredibly. Joining me from Frankston Football Club is Sarah Henderson, the Federal Opposition's education spokesman. Sarah, what is this? You never struck me as a woman who goes on benders. Why are you still partying?
Well, Andrew, great to join you from the Frankston Footy Club. The Liberal faithful are celebrating Australia Day, of course, and Nathan Conroy, our candidate for Dunkley. We're out on the hustings with him. And, of course, I'm asking all people in Dunkley to send a message to Anthony Albanese, vote against this terrible government and elect Nathan Conroy. But it's a great day here in Dunkley.
No, but the thing is, Sarah, I'm sensing a real uneasiness among many Australians about these attacks on Australia Day, against Australia itself, its history, as taught in schools, for instance, these attacks on its institutions. I don't know. I think this is going to be a really big issue in all the myriad ways that it manifests itself for the coalition this year. What is to be done?
Well, Andrew, it's absolutely appalling. And in my region, the Geelong region, the local councils there have turned their back on Australia Day. The City of Greater Geelong, Andrew, has even passed a motion declaring that they will not mention the words Australia Day in any of their materials. And would you believe they have made a calendar, sent it to some 139,000 local homes, and on the 26th of January, the words Australia Day do not appear. That is an absolute disgrace. I condemn the City of Greater Geelong and all councils who've turned their back on Australia Day. And as you say, Australians are fed up. We love our country. We want to celebrate all that is wonderful. And of course, we want to celebrate our great nation. So this is divisive. And of course, it's been fueled by Anthony Albanese, which changed the rules and has now given councils the opportunity not to hold citizenship ceremonies, I should say, on the 26th of January. And of course, that's led to further division.
That is so true. Sarah Henderson, thank you so much for your time, and happy Australia Day +3 to you too. Really appreciate it. Let's make it Australia Day every day. But something else that's really strange. What part of the word no does the Prime Minister not understand? Now, last year, 60% of Australians voted no to his plan to divide us by race and create a kind of Aboriginal-only advisory parliament in a constitution. But now, despite that amazing setback, Albanese seems determined to make one of the people behind that racist plan our new Governor-General. Someone who tried to divide us is now appointed to something that's supposed to unite us. Now, both his apparent, and it's only rumours, right? He's not confirming it. Both apparent candidates identify as Aboriginal. Of course, he wants to make history. One is Indigenous Australians Minister Linda Burney, who was clearly incompetent and not across the detail of the voice he was trying to sell us, and Tom Calma, who co-designed the voice and made it totally incomprehensible and impossible to sell. Here is the Prime Minister today, once again refusing to give a straight answer.
I'm consulting with the King as is appropriate, and it's important that that proper process be undertaken.
Is it a possibility you could appoint a Tom Calma or a Linda Burney?
I'm not going to go through options, because then you get into will it be a man, will it be a woman?
Joining me is the panel, Liberal MP Garth Hamilton and Stephen Chavura, Senior Lecturer in History at Campion College and author of a very good book on politics. The Prime Minister clearly wants to appoint Stephen the first Aboriginal Governor-General. Is this tokenism a good idea when these are the apparent candidates?
Well, I would love to see an Indigenous Australian as Governor-General, but no one who agrees with the Uluru Statement from the heart in full should be allowed anywhere near the office of the Governor-General. And both Linda Burney and Tom Calma are enthusiastic supporters of it. But that statement calls for two Australias. That statement says it needs to establish a Makarrata Commission or a treaty. Now, the Governor-General is there to bring about unity in Australia, and any Governor-General who signs up or enthusiastically agrees with the Uluru Statement of the Heart believes that Australia as it is a colonial project and we need to create two sovereignties, as the Uluru Statement website said. So neither of those candidates nor anyone who agrees with the Uluru Statement from the Heart should be allowed near the office of Governor-General.
Now, Garth, what do you make of this? Because I think straight off the bat to say, listen, I want to make it the first Aboriginal Governor-General. No, just make it the best person in the country, regardless of race. I think we are just sick of race being used as a qualification.
Absolutely. Look, I grew up in Ipswich with Sir Neville Bonner, Senator. The first Aboriginal Australian to become a parliamentarian, and he did it off his own bat. No one chose him because of the colour of his skin. I'm very proud to be part of a party that chose him repeatedly to be on the Senate ticket. He was chosen on competence, and that's not what is being offered. I think it's terribly demeaning to our Aboriginal brothers and sisters to say that you could become, you could be chosen for the highest honour in the land, but only if we restrict the selection criteria down to your skin colour. I think that's terribly sad. And look, if we are going to be, if this is truly about competence, and it must be an Aboriginal Australian, why isn't Warren Mundine's name been thrown forward? There's someone who actually does have some bipartisan skin in the game. He's been with Labor, he's been with the Liberal Party, and during the Voice referendum, he really picked the tone of Australia. He was able to speak to households right across Australia in a way that Karma certainly couldn't, and Linda Burney simply is incapable of doing.
Now, I should underline, we don't know who the candidates are. It's not saying, I'm just saying there's been a number of stories swirling around these kinds of names, and I think if he goes down that way, it will backfire on him big time. Meanwhile, Stephen, the media, the ABC, the New South Wales Premier, the New South Wales Police have all piled onto this bunch of dumb neo-Nazis, stupid, racist, half of them blow-ins from Victoria, some of them wearing ludicrously too tight T-shirts. Really, Australia's not going to fall to morons like this. And it's all, but, good, fine, clamp down on them, stop them protesting and all that kind of thing. I don't want racists in the streets. But can you explain to me why nothing, though, these seem like easy targets, why nothing is being done about the protesters calling for Australia to be abolished, protesters who police think will apparently riot at even the sight of an Aboriginal flag? Or where's the action against several Islamic hate preachers I've shown here over the last, month or two, like this guy?
من هؤلاء الوحوش الذين نزعت الرحمة من قلوبهم أهم صفة من صفات اليهود هي أنهم شعب متعطش لسفك الدماء.
Please say, oh no, we're not going to crack down on this guy. No law's really been broken. But Stephen, when this happens, I wonder whether the public is going to think the policing on Australia Day is very selective.
Yeah, I would wonder too, and I wouldn't blame them if they thought that it was. And I don't want to blame the police for any, individual police officers necessarily for if there is any selective policing, because one thing that police officers and the police force is actually very scared of is the weaponisation of accusations of racism. And just the worst thing for police PR is when professional race baiters start accusing the police who might be investigating things like Islamic terror or ethnic crime to accuse them of just being racists. And so I think one of the things that could feed into any potential selective policing is this problem of weaponising accusations of racism. I mean, a few years ago, a report came out and the police said that they had hundreds and hundreds of instances of the ISIS flag being flown in New South Wales. We clearly have a problem with hatred in Australia. I doubt very much that it's fueled by small groups of silly, ridiculous, idiotic neo-Nazis.
Yeah, and the example I'd probably give. But no one likes neo-Nazis. But Garth, I mean, I had here at the top of the show 2 people threatened, or one in particular, threatened with arrest for wearing a hat with 2 Australian flags on it. I mean, on Australia Day. I mean, can you believe this?
It's extraordinary, and as you say, of course, neo-Nazis deserve what they have coming to them. But the bizarre part is, I don't think it's policing. I think the issue is media coverage. There's a weird link between the far left and some of these pro-Hamas or anti-Semitic views that are being expressed at the moment, and they're being ignored in the media. We've seen this coverage of the hard right. No one wants to talk about what's happening on the hard left. For us to be in Australia and for the idea that the word Zionist now has negative connotations. No, we do support Israel. We have always supported Israel, and God willing, will continue to do so. Why on earth this should become an issue that the hard left have taken up?
On that point, and you as a Queenslander, Yeah, I've been alerted to something by the Australian Jewish Association. A Jewish ratepayer wrote to the local councillor for the Gabba, in Brisbane, who's a Green. And this resident was complaining that painting a giant Palestinian flag on the road, next to an Aboriginal one, I should say, a giant Palestinian flag on the road made her feel unsafe as a Jew. The councillor's advisor, who goes by the pronouns he, she, they, them, and whatever, wrote back telling her to read a long list of anti-Israeli propaganda he'd linked to, and said, "We take leadership from Jewish voices who call out Zionism itself as anti-Semitic," telling a Jew that wanting a homeland that is safe for Jews is racist and anti-Semitic and she should wise up. I mean, what the hell's going on?
It is extraordinary. And look, I don't want to be like Greg Sheridan and quote my own columns, but I did write earlier this week, councils aren't elected. Councils simply aren't elected to deal with issues of home affairs, citizenship, these sort of things. They're there to deal with roads, rates and rubbish. The problem these councils get in, they don't have a mandate to talk on these issues. And for years, here's the honest truth, for years we've thought that there's been no consequence for voting for Greens on councils right across Australia. We thought that's a fine little place for them with, they can go and they love trees and they're very happy people. No, there is a consequence. And these extreme views are creeping in. And unfortunately now they have majorities on some of these councils and they're creeping through into the state, into the federal parliament. And these views are harmful. They're not Australian views. They don't align with Australians.
Yeah, the councils are beachheads, gives them access to money, to power, to a platform, and they use it in ways you don't expect. You can say, rates and rubbish, but they've got power. They're going to play politics. Stephen, there's a really nasty anti-Israel feeling out there, but it's not just at the show. It goes right to the very top. And to me, some of it looks dangerously like Jew hatred. For Saturday, here's an astonishing example. Saturday was International Holocaust Remembrance Day, to remember how Nazi Germany slaughtered 6 million Jews in a bid to wipe them out. Yet the UN Secretary-General, the left-wing Antonio Guterres, posted a tweet and a video about that Holocaust Remembrance Day that did not mention Jews even once. Here he is.
To all who confront prejudice and persecution, let us clearly say you are not alone. The United Nations stands with you.
And it's not alone. I've got other examples like Scotland's First Minister, a Muslim with a Palestinian wife, now the First Minister of Scotland, didn't mention Jews once in his Holocaust Remembrance Day either and turned it almost into an attack on Israel with hint, 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 here he is.
So today, I light a candle in solidarity with every person affected by the Holocaust. And today, we pay tribute to the survivors of those atrocities. We must unite against hatred wherever we see it, no matter the perpetrator or the victim.
Stephen Chavura, making International Holocaust Remembrance Day Jew-free, Judenrein, seems to me the ultimate insult. I mean, I'm stunned.
Yeah, and as you say, it goes right to the top. I mean, in 2022, the UN General Assembly passed more resolutions against Israel than it did against all other nations combined. And that includes nations like China, Saudi Arabia, Iran, North Korea. There is a pervasive anti-Israel bias in the UN. And you have it also in universities all around the world, certainly in Australia, where you have Middle East Studies Department, you have Islamic Studies Department, you have student unions who are very, very anti-Israel, very, very pro-Palestine. And of course, the people who go in and take these courses wind up going on to councils, wind up going into the media. And we're sort of reaping it all now after this terrible tragedy. I mean, you would think, Andrew, you would think that it was Israel who went into Gaza and committed all those atrocities. You know, the way people talk about Israel. It's unbelievable.
Yep. No, it's just been blotted from their mind. What Hamas attack? No, don't remember it. I don't know. Garth Hamilton, Stephen Chavura, thank you very much to you both. Now, after the break, the vegan restaurant that put meat back on the menu to survive. Wow, the hatred. After this. Now, at the top of the show, we had that interview with Frank Stradzins and Dar Thorley about how police are threatening them with arrest for wearing Australia Day flags. Obviously, that something went wrong. Half the interview didn't play. If you want to watch it all, and you should, we will have it online on skynews.com.au. So please have a look at it there, because it's as is disgraceful. Anyway, we apologise for that. But it does seem we have a whole generation now of people looking for some excuse to be a bully, to push people around and still feel more moral than them. Now, the Palestinian cause is obviously one excuse now. You see some of the protests. The global warming movement has long been another. And for instance, just the other day, just over the weekend, 2 climate extremists threw soup on the world's most famous painting, the Mona Lisa, at the Louvre, to claim we're running out of food because of, well, you guessed it, global warming. In fact, of course, again, totally ignorant morons. The opposite is true. The warmer we've got, the bigger the world's harvests have been of grain crops, for instance. That's the orange line at the top, and the grey, the stocks of grain, also at about record levels. So no worry about that. Joining me from London is writer, author, columnist and broadcaster Esther Kraku. Esther, thank you so much for joining us again. It seems to me we have lost the ability to disagree politely without wanting to, you know, smash the other person, cost them their job, bully them, interrupt their time at the Australian Open or the cricket, or to interrupt their time looking at the world's greatest paintings, things like that. It's really quite extraordinary.
It is quite extraordinary, and this latest protest at the Louvre, where 2 members of, believe it or not, Food Response, which is now the 3rd group in sort of the holy trifecta of climate nonsense, the other 2 being Extinction Rebellion and Just Stop Oil. They're protesting because apparently 1 in 3 farmers in France don't get 3 square meals a day. Now, they could get 4 square meals a day, or just 2, we don't know. But apparently this has become the latest cause du jour. So they decided to throw pumpkin soup at the Mona Lisa in the Louvre, even though they know that 80% of people go to the Louvre to see the Mona Lisa. Now, this particular painting has really had some unfortunate luck. It's faced an acid attack, it's faced theft, it's faced cream pie being thrown at it, and now pumpkin soup is the latest in this. But look, these people join the congregation of the mentally unwell that don't know how actually to advocate for their cause other than annoying people to no end. And this is just one example of that. I mean, clearly they cannot have the ability to read the room, because they decided to throw pumpkin soup at this painting and get the whole exhibition shut down for the entire day, ruining other people's tourism of the Mona Lisa.
Well, you say that, you know, they cost their cause. That's the extraordinary thing. They do, but they don't seem to care. So for me, it really is quite a selfish thing. It's about advertising themselves rather than the cause. But speaking of and staying with food, a man opened a vegan restaurant at Macclesfield, which is up your end of the planet, couldn't make it pay, has a baby to feed, has another baby on the way, so he adds meat to the menu to stay in business. So a vegan can now bring their meat-eating partner to his restaurant and both get fed. But he says it's getting bombarded with hate. And my question is, Esther, if the vegans really care so much that his vegan restaurants stay vegan, then as he says, go and pay his bills for him.
Well, of course. I mean, I'm surprised that he decided to open a vegan restaurant in a small market town like Macclesfield up north. He's not in some sort of trendy suburb of London. I don't know where he thought there'd be many vegans in that part of the world. But I have a funny story about this, actually, because I was looking for an abattoir, because I live sort of north of London and I'm surrounded by loads of farms, and I was looking for an abattoir, and I kid you not, every single abattoir that I searched, the Google reviews were bombarded by vegans calling it a place of hell and a place of torture. So this is unsurprising. Unfortunately for him, he's faced the harsh reality that actually there are only about 10 vegans in the UK, and so if he does have a restaurant, he needs to diversify his menu a little bit. And vegans don't like the fact that many people like to eat meat, actually.
Are you trying to tell me this is a tragic story, the only vegan in the village? We'll see. The European Union, meanwhile, has issued a 61-page booklet advising politicians and public servants to scrap gendered language. You know, you can't say no man's land. Also, don't say pushy or shrill because that's what's used against women, and don't say virile because that's used to praise men. And you can't say king and queen. You've got to say queen and king, even if a woman simply married into the title to get the queen business. Fair enough?
I mean, clearly the EU has bigger problems to be worrying about than to release a gender sensitivities report to the country to best describe things like virile. I mean, I kid you not. One of the reasons why they said to reword virile to strong is because virile is mainly used to describe men. Although I'm pretty sure if you told most men that their woman is virile, they'll assume that it's one of those new kinds of women with penises. So you know, men steer clear of virile women.
Look, you've trumped me, but honestly, like you say, 61. Where do they get the time for this, Esther?
I mean, clearly the EU has, like I've said, bigger problems to worry about, but it's actually part of the broader scope of this sort of takeover. It's not just about policing your language, it's also about policing other aspects of your life. You know, today you can't say fireman or firewoman, tomorrow you can't say, you know, things like king and queen. It all comes down to the control, and really they know that this is pointless. They know that most people are still going to call only men virile, but they feel the need to say that to highlight their virtuousness and their piety.
I think you got it absolutely right. It is about control. Setting up tripwires, people fall over them. Gotcha, I'm better than you. That's really what it is. Esther Kraku, thank you so much for your time. Coming up next, Sharry Markson. Good night.